I will take this a step further. Disney does not know how to handle any kind of story that has a protagonist that is a little bit off the beaten path. It cannot handle a morally gray protagonist at all. And the prime example that I will always give is the war crime that Disney committed with this movie. I have never watched a movie screaming at the television like I was watching the Super Bowl. I still remember how angry I was watching this movie. My husband came home from work. He was like, "What the hell are you watching? Like you sound like you want to fight somebody." I'm like, "This fucking movie. It was so bad." So for those of you who grew up without childhoods and didn't read the Artemis Fowl series, the Artemis Fowl series is brilliant. It is about it starts off with a 12-year-old boy. He is trying to exploit the fairy world for all of its money so he can save his dad. And I was insane about these books. Like whenever I was a kid and I walked into the Borders and I saw the new Artemis Fowl book out, I would drop everything and buy it. It didn't matter what I was at the Borders for. This also is really showing my age because when I was a kid, I was going to Borders to buy my books and not Barnes and Noble. So when we got the announcement of an Artemis Fowl movie, I was like, all right, cool. Hopefully they don't fuck it up. But then they fucked it up. As a disclaimer, I don't think the cast themselves did anything wrong. I think that the cast did the best that they could with what they were given. But what they were given was garbage. First of all, the casting, I feel like Disney was trying to do this thing where they were trying to be more inclusive. But then when they were more inclusive, they changed the characters. Like, okay, for example, Butler and Juliet, they're supposed to be Eurasian. It is very tied into their storylines that they're both European and Asian. Like, it matters to them. But then they're cast as Black, so they can't do all that stuff in the books that relates to their Eurasian heritage, which annoying, but not the worst thing. But then Holly was cast as a white child, but she's not a child. She's an adult, and her skin tone is nut brown. So they basically did like 6 of one and then half a dozen in the other, where Butler and Juliet were made into Black characters, even though their characters in the books are very specifically Eurasian. But then Holly was made to be white. Literally white. You would have had the same amount of representation had you just casted them the way that the books tell you to cast them. And then to make matters worse, they made Commander Root a woman. That's literally going against the themes of the books. Why would you do that? There's this whole thing where Commander Root is talking to Holly about like, okay, like you might feel like I'm giving you shit because you're the first female leprechaun, recon leprechaun on the Force. And yeah, you're right. I am giving you shit because everyone is looking at you and you're like the example that the other women who are trying to come up in this system. They're going to be looking to you as an example. It's not fair to you, but you have to be good enough for yourself and for everybody else. And that's a big thing. Like, and that happens very early on in the books. And that is just completely gone with Commander Root being a woman. While the casting issues are annoying in this movie, they're not nearly as bad as the liberties that were taken with the story. So, like, on a very basic level, the premise of Artemis Fowl requires that his father is missing. Like, he's being held hostage in the Arctic Circle. That's like a whole other thing. That's supposed to be a book 2, movie 2 thing. But the movies don't make him missing. Like, he's still around. Then why is he doing all this? Like, it's like these simple basic things. But even more so than that, the premise of Artemis Fowl is that Artemis Fowl is a morally gray character that happens to be a child. Like, this dude serves his adult caretakers spiked champagne so he can make them pass out so he can do what he's gonna do. This kid spiked alcohol with holy water and gave it to a 1,000-year-old sprite and would have let her die, writhing in pain, if she didn't give him her special fairy Bible. And then he translated it with a like, I think he did it with like a program that he designed. Like, this kid was awesome. And the Disney movie just goes, "That's nice," and then just completely butchers everything about that. So, and Artemis Fowl in the movie is not nearly as morally gray as his book counterpart, and it really, really fucks up the movie. And honestly, it really stinks because I feel like we could have had a full franchise had they just allowed Artemis Fowl to be Artemis Fowl. All this to say, Disney cannot be trusted with morally gray characters, especially morally gray main characters. Like, they can under certain circumstances. I feel like Scarlet Witch with WandaVision is a good example of Disney handling a morally gray protagonist well. But once it gets into movies, once it gets into that point where they're like, oh no, like this is going to be like a mainline franchise thing, at that point, they want to whitewash. They want to sand off all the sharp edges of all of their morally gray main characters. And Artemis Fowl is just a huge example of that. And it's so disappointing. I was so looking forward to everybody seeing how awesome Artemis Fowl was, and because it's one of the series that I grew up with, and it just didn't happen, and it's so upsetting.